All right, everyone. Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's first segment of the Winter Nature Challenge 2021. My name is Brian Taylor, and I work for the North and South Rivers Watershed Association, and I have a few great people here with me. So just a little intro before we begin. Once again, welcome and thanks for being here. We're really excited to offer this program. As many of you probably know, this is a new virtual iteration to what would normally be called the WaterWatch Lecture Series. Now, for a few years, we've been considering changing up the program a little bit and adjusting it to kind of keep it new and fresh. And what a great year to try something very different. So we have gone with the virtual route, but still and we're really excited to offer a really unique and diverse mix of talks here every Wednesday. So a little bit about how this program works is that for the next 9 Wednesdays at the same time, 7 p.m. is going to be a webinar and talking about a whole lot of different subjects, all very, very interesting. And that each webinar is going to end with a sort of a challenge. This challenge might be outdoor related. It might be something that you could do inside. It could be something that you could do on your own or with your family. How this is going to work is there's going to be the talk on Wednesday. And then after the talk, you're going to hear about how to complete the challenge. And then you'll have until the following Wednesday to complete the challenge, whichever it may be. And then also each week is going to be either one or a couple different guided programs that you could do with us that you can, for a small fee, register for. And we will send you the registration links for that as well. Obviously, all very, very small groups, very safe and socially distanced and all that. So if that is something that you're interested in, you'll receive more information about that. All right. So that is pretty much it. We will be recording this. So if there's anyone who registered who cannot join us or if for whatever reason, we will have this recorded and we'll be able to provide it afterwards to folks. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce one of our panelists with Mass Audubon, Doug Lowry.
Thanks, Brian. So this is a very exciting change up, I think, and but it still honors the long history that the 3 organizations have with the WaterWatch series. But we are changing it up a little bit. One, to get you outside, because that's what people are jonesing to do. People have their lives allow it to be outside more often. A lot of people aren't commuting, etc. And we spend a lot of time when we're inside in front of the computer. So we said, let's take advantage of that, but use it as an incentive to get out and explore our community. And yeah, we're just so excited. The 3 organizations have a long history of partnerships. And we get a lot more clout when we're doing things collaboratively. And so we're excited about this switch up a little bit and look forward to engaging with you on a regular basis. So yeah, and thanks very much to Chris and to Brian for, they did the yeoman's work on this. They've been really nose to the grindstone putting this together, and we appreciate it. So we also like to thank our sponsors. The long history of sponsorship. Clean Harbors has come back again, and the Mass Cultural Council is back supporting us as well. So look for those sponsorships every week. We will have a special occasion. One of our programs will be underwritten to some degree by Battelle Labs. So when that happens, we'll let you know. But yeah, things are pretty exciting, kind of along the same lines as Brian was talking about, is that we all had to make some changes. And so some of the exciting changes at Mass Audubon is that we are still going to be South Shore sanctuaries, but we are now part of a regional hub or region, if you will, that also includes Oak Knoll down in Attleboro, Great Neck and Wareham, Tidmarsh and Plymouth, and Allen's Pond in Westport. So the ground we're covering out of this office is much larger, which has some advantages as far as impact and outreach. So we're excited about that. But we look forward to continue to being a big part of the local community. Coming up quickly here on Friday, we start an 8-part Adventures in the Wildest Places. And it starts this Friday and continues for 8 Fridays at noon to 1:30, an hour-and-a-half long program. And if you want more information on this, you can go to our website. That is massaudubon.org. And you'll see this pretty self-explanatory. We're pretty excited about the places we're going to visit, including having a visit from an astronaut and talking about living on the International Space Station and how it connects to her love of the outdoors. So yes, please join us for walks at all of our sanctuaries. We have 38,000 acres in Massachusetts for you to enjoy. And so we hope you get a chance to get out there and hike around. Let's send it back to Brian because he has some exciting news.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks very much, Doug. Obviously, similar to Mass Audubon, as well as the South Shore Natural Science Center, NSRWA, the North-South Rivers Watershed Association, also has a lot of really fun programs that we continue to do, including walks, including virtual programs, this being one of them. And there's always some big news here in and around the watershed. For example, just yesterday, Governor Baker signed a sewage notification bill, which is really exciting, something that we've been advocating for quite some time, which is, long story short, all it is just you will be, people will be notified when sewage is being discharged into our water, and something that you think would be, sort of expected. Well, now it is, and so that's just something really cool that just happened that we're still getting more information about, but something that we have gotten the governor's attention, and so we certainly are really happy for that, as well as now we are in the governor's ear. Maybe we'll be able to have some more things, exciting changes happen in the future. So it's great about that. While I'm here, in terms of other things that the North-South Rivers Watershed is doing, I'm assuming that everyone here is familiar with who we are and what we do, but really through advocacy, education, and engagement, we're just a local South Shore grassroots nonprofit that is here providing programs, providing education, providing a voice for protecting our water, both for all the animals that depend on it, as well as for the people that survive off it. So it's all, we're all part of this ecosystem that is all dependent on water, and we want to make sure that we have water protected for now and for the future. So definitely go to our website and check out all that's going on there. We also have a great database for places to explore in and around the watershed, whether you're interested in fishing, paddling, hiking, or just going out and connect with nature. And just as Doug said, now we need nature now more than ever, and being able to connect and explore and have a great time out in the outdoors is a great way, in our mind, a way that when people connect with the outdoors, they're more likely to want to help protect it and to make sure it's there for them and for the future. So that's just a boil down a very short little synopsis of what our mission is. So with that, I believe I am going to pass it over to Chris with the South Shore Natural Science Center.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. And just going to reiterate what Brian and Doug said. We're really excited to be here. We've spent a lot of time virtually. We've planning this program and practicing webinar. And so we're excited to be able to launch this series. And so with that, we also have some additional programming, family programming coming up. We're still trying to catch up from Corn Festival, which did not happen this year, but we were excited to get some funding from the Mass Cultural Council. And so we are able to bring some of our favorite presenters and entertainers to you virtually this coming month in January. First off is Leah Hopkins with the Narragansett tribe. She will be demonstrating corn husk creations, and that will be Saturday, January 24th at 11 a.m. It is very limited participation. It is free. Registration will begin on Friday. And that's geared toward children ages 8 and up with their family. So if you want to register, again, limited spots, and you'll be able to register on Friday. And then the other is one of our favorite storytellers, Big Ryan's Tall Tales. He will be joining us for 2 different programs. One is Sunday, January 24th at 7 p.m. Then again on Saturday, January 30th at 10 a.m. And so that registration will also begin on Friday. So we're very excited to bring a little piece of Corn Festival to the South Shore this year, even though we couldn't do it in person. So join us for that programming. And with that, I am going to turn it. Actually, I forgot about this slide. This program is free. We do have some sponsorships and underwriters, but we are always looking for support to help protect the nature and outdoors on the South Shore, and also to bring some great environmental education programming to the residents of the South Shore. So there are 2 ways to donate, and Brian is going to put the link into the chat feature, so you can click right on the link there, or you can also text the word GIVE, G-I-V-E, to that number right there, 781-808-3194, and then you will receive a secure donation link. The dollars that you donate will be spread amongst all 3 organizations, and it really helps to support the great work that we all do. We all have similar overlapping missions, and we need your support, and we wouldn't be here without donors like you. So please give and help us out. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Brian.
Yep, great. Thanks, Chris. I just added a link in the chat to donate if you want to donate now, or once again, text to that number. We'll continue to put that throughout the program in the chat below, so you can donate if you please. Your support is greatly appreciated. So without further ado, let's go ahead and kick it off for the first installment of this year's Nature Challenge 2021. So we have a fantastic guest speaker tonight with Plymouth County Extension. I'm incredibly happy and excited to introduce Blake Dinius with Plymouth County.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming out to this really cool and different take on a webinar. I know, like many of you, I'm probably feeling pretty burnt out from all the Zooms that we've been doing, so this was a really good opportunity to really change things up. And we're going to talk today about amazing arthropods. But first, just a really quick introduction. If none of you have seen me before or know who I am, my name is Blake Dinius. That's me. Prior to getting my job, I worked in honeybee research, and this is an example of some of the work I used to do. But currently, I'm an educator, and I go out around the county and I give programs on varying formats and lead walks and kids, high school, garden clubs, you name it. But you can really just think of me as a giant bug nerd. I've been a nerd my entire life, and I'm not about to stop now. So what is it about arthropods that's so amazing, and why are we here tonight? Well, I'm assuming that most of you are here to learn a little bit more about insects, and maybe you already love insects, maybe you don't, but the general sentiment that, at least growing up, that I have kind of encountered is that this is your typical reaction when people see insects, and maybe followed by something like this. And when you love something so much, this has been something that I've been up against my entire life, trying to fight this kind of fear and this, really this kind of misunderstanding for something that is really so beneficial and so helpful to the world around us. But we see this even now on things like Facebook. You can look up a bunch of memes, and they all say basically the same thing, spreading this fear and misinformation about insects. And you can even see it evident in grown adults, where you've got this grown man who's swatting at what I believe is a beetle flying around his head, and he's supposed to be a professional news anchor, and look at him kind of afraid of something that is not going to hurt him at all. And you have an entire industry that is built up around killing insects. It is built up around killing these things, and most of the time these things are not a problem at all. You see this on the preferred pest control. It says there's never just one, and they're showing spiders, which, to be perfectly honest, there really aren't any medically significant spiders, you know, that you really have to be concerned about here in Massachusetts. They just don't exist, but they really make you frightened and afraid of these things getting in your house. We really want to think of our homes as these pristine, sterile environments where they need to be completely devoid of life except for human beings coming in. But I hate to say it, that's simply an impossible task, and a lot of people are making money off of that. But even looking back through history, we're really not sure where this fear of insects came from and where this hatred, but you can look back through history and you can see even in like Middle English, Middle Irish, Welsh, Scottish, all these names, the word bug is not a good thing. It's not something that people really want to cozy up against. You know, ghosts, goblins, bugbears, that's these images of these supernatural beings below. And that's what we call them. We call them bugs. We call them things that are scary, basically. But the word bug also means to annoy. I was very much like the bottom left picture when I was a kid to my sisters, and I really, really loved them very much for putting up with me back then. Bug also means a defect in computer systems or a cold, so it never means something good. You never call someone a bug if you really like them. That is just not necessarily the case. But insects are really pervasive in our culture. Insects and arachnids, they're in our literature, they're in our movies. You know, one of my favorite movies, Jurassic Park, shows they're bringing back dinosaurs from a mosquito. And for the astute observer, they'll notice that insect that John Hammond's holding is actually a male mosquito that doesn't feed on blood. And so it's one of those insects that for an entomologist, you kind of nitpick these things in films, but I have a good time with it anyways. They're in our songs, and some of the really old songs, you know, La Cucaracha, Jimmy Cracked Corn and I Don't Care. All these songs are prevalent songs about insects. So it's very apparent that we've had this very tight association, this inextricable connection to insects that is just not going away anytime soon. And we see it apparent in religion too. You know, Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, references in the Bible, and perhaps the most famous reference is the folktale character Anansi the spider, which is told to many different children. And I grew up, that was one of my favorite books growing up. But despite all of this kind of dislike of insects in pop culture and in normal culture, scientists have been fascinated with insects from pretty much the beginning of time. You've got Aristotle, Darwin, Wallace, Linnaeus, Wilson, all these really big names. You would even consider them to be entomologists if you really kind of looked at the types of things that they studied. They really had a large focus on studying insects. And the reason for this is because when you look at all of the animals combined, what you'll find is that some of the things we typically associate with the word animal, things like mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish, are vertebrates. They make up less than 5% of all animals. Insects, on the other hand, make up about 66 to 73% of all animal life. And this number it just continually changes, and it in some ways becomes an even larger proportion. And that's because the number of undiscovered mammals left in the world is 303. Yet insects, there are so many undiscovered insects left in the world. It's mind-blowing. And we actually have estimates as high as 30 million, which would mean that insects make up greater than 90% of of all animal life. So at this point in the presentation, what I have to say, I'm going to be completely brutally honest with you. If you're someone who calls yourself an animal lover, but you don't like insects, you're a liar. That is something that you cannot possibly say. You cannot say you're an animal, you're a something lover and dislike over 98% of the things that consist of that category. But just to give you an idea of how many 30 million is, if you looked for insects 16 hours a day and you were lucky enough to find one new species every hour, that's impossible. It would take you 5,136 years to find the 30 million species. That is absolutely insane. And so no person is ever going to find all the insect species, but you yourself might even find one. There are just so many out there. There are even some unknown behaviors and unknown things about insects. Some insects, we don't know what they feed on. And for this insect right here, this really bizarre looking insect called a forceps fly, we even don't know how it reproduces. We have never seen this insect reproduce in a laboratory setting. And if anyone were to find this insect and figure out how it reproduces, that would actually be a scientific publication, and it'd be pretty groundbreaking to say the least. So insects, making up estimated, let's say a conservative estimate of 66% of all animal life, maybe as high as 98%. Insects really are the little things that run our world. They are so closely associated with all the inner workings of all of nature. So if you like nature, nature would not be the way it is right now without insects. 80% of all flowering plants are dependent on insects. 60% of birds rely on insects for food. And they even play very essential roles in decomposition, roles breaking down dead carcasses or breaking down decaying wood. And I apologize for the next slide. I have a little bit of a bathroom sense of humor. There would be lots and lots of poop. One cow alone has been estimated to decrease the effective area of a pasture by 20% just by the poop it generates alone. And there was actually an interesting project done in the mid-1900s, where they imported cattle into Australia, and there weren't native poop decomposers in Australia to break down that cattle poop. They had all basically evolved alongside the native Australian animals, and they weren't capable of breaking down the cattle. And so the poop just sat in pastures for months and sometimes years, just building up in pastures. And it wasn't until they imported dung beetles, specific dung beetles, that now they saw that the poop starting to go away. So needless to say, without insects, yeah, we'd be maybe looking a little bit like poor Augustus in this Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Would not be a pretty sight. Insects are responsible for a large portion of all the infectious diseases and deaths annually. So here's kind of the bad about insects. 70% of all infectious diseases are attributed to insects. Now these figures might be a little bit different. They're based on 2020 numbers and not 2020, earlier in the year. So, they might have been tallied a little bit different after this Corona pandemic. But I have to say that that's still a pretty large number, caused by these tiny little organisms. And if that alone doesn't get you to care about insects, well, without insects, we wouldn't have chocolate, pumpkin pie, or silk clothing. So those things would go away. So if you still didn't care about insects beforehand, well, say goodbye to chocolate and things like pumpkin pie. So the thing about insects is that, they're not necessarily well known by the general public. They're pretty darn complicated and they're so varied, but they're also extremely important. And so what this means is that knowing about insects is very, very useful, and you can make a lot of money, and there's a lot of money involved in knowing about insects. If you've ever wondered why Disney, if anyone's been to Disney and they've ever wondered why they haven't really had to deal with mosquitoes too much, there's a really good reason for that. So despite the fact that Disney is basically built into a swamp, if you look at this, it's a satellite image on the left of where Disney is located. You can see Epcot is located even closer. It's less than 10 miles from the swamp, and you can see that image on the right. That is a perfect classic example of mosquito breeding habitat, and Disney is not very far from that. In fact, is built up like basically right in it. Yet there's really no mosquitoes you encounter in Disney. And the reason for that is because of this guy, Joe Potter. and he was the governor of the Panama Canal Zone. And when he was working down there, he learned a heck of a lot about mosquitoes. So he might not have been an entomologist by trade, but he knew a lot by simply practicing and being around them. And he was brought on to help design Walt Disney World. And if you look at this, there's all these nice sewage drainage ditches, and even just the shape of the Magical Kingdom, these tall, steep steeples are just really not great at collecting water. And they're designed that not just to look pretty, but actually intentionally designed that way so that water does not pool and collect in certain areas. And that is essentially a desert for mosquitoes. So you're naturally kind of protecting the park against mosquitoes by just designing the buildings and structures a certain way. And this guy, Joe Potter, was really good at doing that. But when you look at the kind of the broad scope beyond Disney, you've got agriculture, estimated $15 billion a year spent in pollination services just in the USA. Pesticide industry, is more than twice that number. Insect pests result in, an estimated 13% crop losses in the USA. House pests, we spend, roughly 4 to 5 billion in the USA alone. Termites, 40 billion worldwide. Bed bugs, multiple millions. In conservation, invasive insects, the US spends $25 billion alone on just insects that are not even supposed to be in this country. And the below image, I have an up and coming insect. This is something that if you haven't heard about yet, you are going to hear about in the next couple of years. And this is called the Spotted Lanternfly. And you can see just how devastating this could be if you look at the photo on the right, just completely covering this tree, and the bottom is a grapevine completely covered by the spotted lanternfly. It's very prevalent in Pennsylvania, and we have had a few kind of false alarms here in Massachusetts already, where we've seen a couple of adult insects, dead adults, coming in on shipments of plants. So it's really a matter of when, not if, spotted lanternfly is going to make it to Massachusetts. So anyways, what are insects? We know them as the kind of creepy crawlies, blah, 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 over 90% of all animals. What exactly defines an insect? Now, insects are nestled in the animal kingdom. Below that, you've got the phylum Arthropoda, right? So amongst that, and we're going to take a quick walk through the taxonomy of this. And then under that, you've got insects, right? And within the arthropods, you've got the Chelicerata, the Chelopoda, the Diplopoda, crustaceans, and insects. And the Diplopods and the Chelopods, that's millipedes and centipedes. And the Chelicerata, that's spiders, other arachnids, mites, ticks, scorpions. And so it's always interesting to point out that insects are more closely related to the lobster that you have for dinner than the spider in your basement. And it's just kind of, at least to me, that blows my mind. And then below the class, you can go all the way into order, and it gets a lot more complicated when you really look at the nitty gritty of things. But we have about 26 orders or so. You might find it easier to remember just the number 26, and they're all wildly different. A praying mantis, very different from a bumblebee, very different from an earwig, very different from a grasshopper. They're all very, very different organisms. And just to give you an example of what an order actually is, in the mammal world, rodents are one order and primates are another order. So you think about the dramatic difference between primate like us and a beaver. We're very, very different. And so the orders in insects can be very, very different as well. But the kind of a breaking news story, just to share with you how quickly things are developing in the entomology world. Just less than a month ago in December, late December, we had this breaking news where we probably end up losing an order. We actually found that the fleas, which used to be their own order, are now nestled inside this other order of scorpion flies. So we think, even though they look so wildly different, that we think that they're now the same order. So let's talk a little bit about we've talked about the complexity of insects and how different they are. Well, what allows them to be so complex and so varied and so interesting? Well, we have to look at what the basic insect is. And this is the insect, not necessarily drinking these pumpkin spice chai lattes or wearing Ugg boots and a North Face jacket. We're going to talk a little bit about the grasshopper, which is one of the more primitive insects and kind of has a more basic body structure. As a kid growing up, you learn insects are divided into 3 segments: head, thorax, abdomen. They've got 6 legs, antenna. And this is a really easy, very simplistic way of looking at things. And for this particular presentation, we're going to stick with that. If you really wanted to expand on things, well, you can kind of look into the nitty gritty and find out, oh, wait, well, that's not necessarily true. Well, what about this? But we're not going to talk about that for now. What's interesting about the segments, so the word insect comes from the word basically cut into sections. And so you can kind of think about this. We think that insects evolved from segmented worms. And you can think about that segmented worm already cut into sections. And each part of the insect, your head, thorax, and abdomen, basically evolved from fusion of those segments into one. So we think that the head, for instance, is really just the fusion of about 6, maybe 7 different segments, all kind of coming together. And even things like the mouth parts and antenna, we think actually evolved from legs. So insects in a lot of ways are kind of like a Mr. Potato Head, where this segmentation allowed them to adapt different parts of their body almost independently of other parts of their body. So you could adapt maybe your hind legs, but leave your mid legs and front legs completely intact. Maybe adapt the abdomen, but leave the head intact. And this allowed them to basically kind of fix and fidget with a bunch of different body parts and colonize all these different niches around the world. So once again, the head, we believe, is maybe the fusion of about 6 or 7 different body segments. And you can see it divided by all these different colored images, or basically all these different parts of mouth. And so you think about, again, the basic insect is a grasshopper. And you can see it's using its chewing, tearing mouth parts, mashing up this leaf. You can see that they're colored in differently. You've got your labium in light blue, your maxilla in yellow, your mandibles in this lime green color, and your labrum in this red color. And you can see that kind of modified into maybe the honeybee. So you've got the labium now has been adapted and modified to be part of what we call the bee's tongue, which is a function that is able to not only lick up a fluid, but also suck up fluid. And so this has now changed to now becoming something completely different. And you've got the butterfly has now adapted these maxilla, which are typically used for like tearing and manipulating food, to now becoming a siphon, where it's able to actually suck up nectar from a flower. And down here, you've got maybe one of the most evolved, arguably probably the most evolved mouth parts in all of the insect class, and maybe even all of the animal kingdom, in the mosquito, where you have the labium is now a sucking organ, but you also have all these different other mouth parts that are now designed to kind of slice. And mosquitoes can actually cannulate blood vessels. They actually can find and cannulate a blood vessel, and kind of in the same way that maybe a phlebotomist might be able to. Leg parts modified very much the same way. You can see how the top example is a tiger beetle, where it has all running legs. All of those legs are designed for running. But then in the different images, you've got praying mantises where their front legs are designed for grasping. You've got these back swimmers, their back legs are designed for swimming. Grasshoppers, their back legs are designed for jumping. And then mole crickets, which are kind of cool, where they can jump, but they can also have their front legs are designed for digging. And so each one of these kind of leg parts can evolve to fulfill a need that insect wants. Another thing that really allowed insects to colonize all these different locations is their ability to reproduce in large numbers. And they can produce lots and lots of offspring with very little time investment. Generally, they have very quick life cycles, a very quick turnaround. But there are some few exceptions, for instance, like the tsetse fly and deerked, which are what we call case-selected organisms, where they basically have very, very few offspring, and they put lots of investment into just that one offspring. And this is an example of basically it's a tsetse fly, and the baby develops inside the mother, and the mother kind of lays almost this fully formed, what we call basically a puparium. It's basically almost a fully formed insect at the very end, and that larva develops inside her body. And she nourishes it too off of a almost milk-like substance. Insects also have in some insects, especially those that undergo what we call complete metamorphosis, they can have very, very specialized life stages. If you think about like a monarch butterfly, where the caterpillar stage is really only designed to eat. It just eats and eats and eats and grows and grows and grows and stores fats and stores energy. And then the pupa, the cocoon, that just is a developmental stage. And then the adult stage is really only around to reproduce and disperse. And so you have very discrete life stages. If you could imagine just, and then there are some insects like there are giant silk moths, for instance, they actually do not even have mouths as adults. Their role is just to live off fat reserves and to disperse and reproduce. That is their objective. They are not even around to eat. And to give you an idea of how important wings are in dispersal and accessing food, the wandering glider is probably one of the most stunning and shining examples of insect dispersal. This insect even puts the monarch butterfly to shame. Recently, I would say in the past few years, the wandering glider has been estimated at migrating 11,200 miles. And when we compare that to our monarch's migration of 3,000 miles, the wandering glider just completely eclipses that. And even as it's migrating over the ocean, we believe that it's soaring on thermal currents and living off of airborne kind of plankton that's being kicked up into the air and just living off of that. And it's just this wild migration. And we even believe that the wandering glider population is not just these isolated populations like we see in most insects, but rather one global population. And sometimes the wandering glider is called the globe skimmer. So there are some wandering gliders that they never leave the pond that they grew up in. But there are others that, we think that they're interbreeding and mixing with wandering gliders from all over the world. See, they're a little bit like people in a way. Some people, they never leave their hometown, and other people, they travel the world. I like to think of wandering gliders very much the same way. So insects are able to colonize very, very different areas. We like to think of insects maybe as being the most abundant and the most weird and the most interesting, maybe in places like the Amazon rainforest. That's true to some extent. There are a lot of colorful, a lot of stunning insects there, and there is a lot of diversity. But there's a lot of really cool insects that exist outside the Amazon rainforest. Like you got insects in the high Arctic, like this woolly bear caterpillar that grows over a period of years, where it will actually grow a little bit every summer and then spend time as a caterpillar overwintering in ice and basically in snow. And then it will grow a little bit and then overwinter and grow a little bit overwinter. And then it just spends, after several years, one summer as an adult, reproduces, and the cycle starts all over again. You got these things called ice crawlers, and they're only found at the tops of mountains and edges of glaciers. And that's what these people are doing in this photo on the right. They're camping, they're actually researchers camping out and looking for these ice crawlers. You've got insects that live in deserts. And you've got this one mosquito that's found in desert oases. And you even have insects that are found living in these really unique habitats, like this one mosquito we have right here in Massachusetts called Weomia smithi. And this mosquito, it grows up in the water found within this pitcher plant. And the interesting thing about this pitcher plant is that unlike other carnivorous plants, this pitcher plant doesn't synthesize all the digestive enzymes that you normally find in most carnivorous plants. Instead, it relies on this mosquito to break down a lot of the stuff and debris that falls into that pitcher plant, and it lives off basically the mosquito's waste. So what the mosquito excretes at the end of digesting it, that's what the pitcher plant absorbs. So you can kind of think about it in the same way that you have all this natural and healthy gut bacteria and stuff living inside your own body that helps you digest and absorb nutrients. This pitcher plant has a mosquito doing just that. And this mosquito actually doesn't even feed on blood. It doesn't bite people. It gets all the nutrition it needs for egg production just based on the things that fall into this pitcher plant. So this is one of the cool mosquitoes that's very rarely encountered, but one that we have here in Massachusetts. One of the only places that you're never going to find insects is the deep ocean, but you can find insects on the top of the open ocean. And that's where you find these insects called sea skaters. Each one of these yellow dots on this map below is been recordings of sea skaters found around the world. You can see they're found in some really, really bizarre locations. And then you have insects that have been adapted to even man-made structures, like this Asian tiger mosquito we think is moving further and further north in these containers, particularly tires, that we've discarded tires. And you can find a very diverse array of insects even inside your home. So in one particular study conducted in 2016, where researchers looked at homes in Raleigh, North Carolina, they found 574 different kinds of insects. And on average, there are about 93 different kinds of insects inside these homes that they looked at. And to give you an idea, there are an estimated 504 birds found in Massachusetts. So just within homes, you may be able to find more insects just with homes than you can find birds in all of Massachusetts. That's how diverse insects are. And I don't want to scare you too much with this. Most of the insects that they found inside homes were actually benign species that really people don't know almost next to nothing about. Things like certain insects that we don't even know what they feed on, where we know almost virtually nothing about these insects that they found in their homes. They were just identified, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, insects are pretty much everywhere you look. And I want to go outside the home. Let's step outside the home for a second and look at kind of the things that you might be able to find in the wild. So most of the time when people go on walks, they're really only interested in maybe getting to the end of their trail, posting an image of themselves on Facebook, trying to get a lot of likes, and that's typically what I see. But what I'm asking you to do now is not necessarily stop and smell the roses, but maybe stop and look at the bugs. If you look at this might just be a section of vegetation people might blaze past, not caring about. They may even step on this area. But living right here is a really cool looking fishing spider that I just happened to see going by. Again, here you've got this nice stand of goldenrod. Again, looks like kind of some tall grasses, not really too much to write home about. But here you've got all these different kinds of insects living right in this one community, including this top left one. It's called a thread-legged bug, not very commonly encountered, but not actually rare. It's just not very commonly encountered. Really cool looking bug, pearl crescent, weevil, and some ants. Again, kind of this doesn't look like too much. You got all these insects living right here, including one of my favorite insects, this stink bug, Mormidea lugans on the top left. I really just like the colors of this bug. It's just got this nice pattern on its back. It looks almost like a piece of candy. We got a ladybug, a assassin bug nymph, and a plant hopper. And what I want to tell you right here is that these three locations were all taken about 10 feet from one another in the same parking lot. I stepped not 10 feet from my car and took all these pictures and got all these insects. So you can find this really diverse array of life in just a very tiny section of land. It just supports so much life, more life than you may even know. And this wasn't even all the insects. Sorry, I have more pictures. I just really kind of picked and chose what I thought would be cool insects that people might want to see. And kind of one of my more favorite experiences last year, I had right here in right behind my office, where I found this really cool looking bug. This is a leaf beetle, and it's a chrysomelid. It's a leaf beetle, and it has these you can't really see it. It's not a really great picture, but it's got this nice red, white, and blue pattern, very American. This is a really interesting beetle. It looks really pretty, but the cool thing about this is how infrequently encountered it is. When I found it, I went to look up where people have seen this, and I checked some of these citizen science websites where I looked at Bug Guide, and this is the number of the gray areas of where this species of bug has been seen on Bug Guide. And you can see really nothing north, Pennsylvania and up, it hasn't been logged into Bug Guide. And you look at iNaturalist, there's one dot over here in Massachusetts. That's me. That's when I logged it in. But every other sighting has been over in Texas. And I asked a bunch of people to identify this, and their best guess is that it's the species Cuscalina miniata, but they actually don't know. So, maybe it's the species, maybe not, but it looks exactly like that species and probably is. So I'm really interested in maybe getting some DNA analysis on this, and you're really trying to figure out what the species actually is. But I found that right, on my lunch, basically I found it on my lunch break. So you can find really cool stuff just in your own backyard. You don't need to go very far. You don't need to go to the Amazon rainforest. So that pretty much wraps up my presentation. I hope that you guys are super motivated to go and look for the ways that insects impact your life and look at and really appreciate the diversity of insects. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about this week's challenge. So are you ready for the challenge of the Winter Nature Challenge presented by the North and South Rivers Watershed Association? And I promise you, I'm not going to make you dance outside your car or eat a Tide Pod. This is going to be much, much easier. It's so easy, a caveman can do it. So this is not, maybe for the first challenge, it's not too much of a challenge. It's just going to be a really interesting activity, and we're really interested in hearing your responses. So what is it? I want you to come up with a unique and meaningful impact that insects have had on you during this week. Let's say during this week. So it can be anything. It can be you going out and finding an insect that you just really thought was beautiful, one coming into your house, or it could be just a way that an insect has affected your life. So here's the criteria. It's got to be related to insects or arthropods. We are going to include things like spiders and pill bugs, which are not necessarily insects. You need to post this online, pictures if possible, that's a plus. And you get 3 chances and that's it. At the end of this, we're going to select the most unique and the most meaningful one of all of these. And of course, it is very subjective. There isn't really objective criteria, but we're just looking for perhaps ones that don't overlap with others. And that's going to make it unique. If everyone's posting, oh, well, you know, I had some honey and it came from a bee, then that's not necessarily unique. In my opinion, not necessarily meaningful either. And so I'll give you a hint, right? Everyone knows the little quip, 1 in 3 bites of food comes from pollinators. So one of these things, not necessarily unique. So kind of just to walk you through some examples, like I ate an apple, sure, comes from a pollinator. Okay, insects, we're eating my dog's poop. Okay, that's kind of, it's a little bit more like unique, as maybe not so meaningful though. An insect like this morning cloak that you can encounter, an insect made my day. Maybe it's a morning cloak. Maybe it's a woolly bear that you saw. Maybe it's a brown marmorated stink bug that you just really never appreciated the beauty of until now. And then the last bit, maybe an example of something that would be really, really cool would be maybe finding this fly, Cyzenos albicans, which is now being used to control winter moth this year. And maybe you have a favorite backyard tree that was suffering from really severe defoliation, and you're just so happy to find this fly in your backyard parasitizing these winter moths, so you don't have to deal with them anymore. And that's it. Once again, we're asking that you post these either with the hashtag North-South Rivers or the tag at NSRWA. And so what you want to use is the tag for Facebook and Twitter, and the hashtag for Instagram. And that pretty much sums up the whole Winter Nature Challenge. If you have any questions about it, you can always feel free to email one of us. We're more than happy to walk you through it. And at this point, we can open up the floor for questions, I believe, or I'm going to pass it off to Brian and Chris or Doug. Maybe they can explain the bit.
Yeah, thanks, Blake. That was absolutely fantastic. Yes, we will be sending out an email very, very soon with a little bit more detailed instructions on how to, if anyone is confused on how to post on social media. But just as Blake said, just really take a good in-depth thought on how insects have positively impacted your life in some way, and then post it on our Facebook page, or on Instagram, or on Twitter, and we will, after a week, select the most creative one that Blake, probably for the most part, will select the most creative one that we will share. And since this is the first challenge, the first of many, you know, we haven't quite figured out what the reward will be, but there will be something. So I believe so expect an email very soon, within actually just the next hour, with just a recap on what the challenge is for this week. I believe the chat function is open, so if if anyone has, we only have a few more minutes left. We would be happy to answer a few questions. And so feel free to type it in the chat. So it looks like we have one that just came in. Blake, what is the best time of year to look for insects in Southeast Massachusetts? Diversity. So they were looking for probably the most time to find the most diverse mix of insects, Blake.
So the insects are going to vary throughout the year. There are going to be some insects that you're only going to be able to find in the spring, and others that you might only be able to find in the fall. There are even some insects, they only live for a couple weeks. You're only able to see them for a couple weeks, and then that's it, and they're gone. A lot of our solitary bees, you're only able to see them for a couple weeks. And the best time that I think that is a good time, especially if you're going to go out and lead like a nature walk or go out with kids. One of my favorite times to go out is in the spring. So the spring, early summer. So you want to look at like maybe May, June, that time frame. And there's a few reasons for that. You know, a lot of our butterflies are going to be kind of prevalent around that time. And you see, once again, you see a lot of bees. So there's a lot of really visible, really kind of easy to see, really cool looking insects. It's bright. It kind of aligns with summer break. And so that's a good time to look for insects. Another time that I would recommend is right in the fall, kind of like going into maybe September-ish area. You're going to see a lot of things like dragonflies and grasshoppers and things like that. That can be really fun. The adults are going to be more around that during that time, late August, September kind of area. So that would be my recommendation. But go out every single day and see what you see. There's going to be different things you're going to be able to see at different times.
Awesome, Blake. Another question came in, and I can ask relate to this question. Why do we have so many stink bugs in our house over the past few years?
So there are two kinds of quote unquote stink bugs that people usually talk about. One of them is not a real stink bug. It's called the Western conifer seed bug, and another one is called the brown marmorated stink bug. And these insects, they're in different families, and they come into our homes. They're actually looking to diapause. They're looking to hibernate. Their natural tendency is usually to do this underneath bark, but our homes are just so much warmer than bark, and I think you can agree with me on that. And so these stink bugs come into our homes and they overwinter, and when you see them, that's actually the ones that are waking up and they're searching for food. So they're kind of getting up for that midnight snack, if you will. They didn't get enough food in the fall, and now they're waking up searching for food. These insects are non-native to our area. So your Western conifer seed bug comes from the West Coast, and your brown marmorated stink bug comes from Asia. And we find them in very large numbers out in the wild, and then they're diaposing within our homes. Some of them, particularly the brown marmorated stink bug, we're seeing this kind of more northern spread, this more northern distribution. And if you think you have a lot now, there are some places in the South where people are literally pushing these stink bugs out of their homes with push brooms. So we haven't seen that yet. Usually when people say they have a lot, they see maybe one a night or maybe 2 or 3 a night. When it gets to the point where you're finding like maybe 30 or 20 or 30 inside your underwear drawer, that's when we have a lot of them. And that is happening in some places in the country. So that's why, so basically part one is that's their normal behavior, so overwinter inside things. And number two, they're invasive. They're reproducing in very large numbers.
Awesome, Blake. We've several more. Let's see, Blake. We are backyard beekeepers that got into this with the best intentions. There was a study that came out from UVM a year ago that found that some of the viruses that are causing problems with honeybees are starting to spill over to native bee species. They're following this closely, but the UVM study is the only one that they know. Do you know anything more about this?
I don't know enough to offer some really like expert advice. I read that study, and I read a number of studies on the same topic. In addition, we also have flies, the flies that are spread around these viruses. So what we kind of think of now is more like flowers are really just kind of like maybe like a rest stop or a rest station bathroom. So if you think about like all of the people that come in through a bathroom, or maybe you might want to think of it as like a mall. Like, so you can kind of think about how Corona has been spreading this year, and all these public locations where people meet up and they're kind of sharing these viruses. You can kind of think of flowers very much the same way. You've got all this different life that's coming to these flowers, and some of these viruses are being shared between all the different life. I know that there are some people that are kind of like, oh, I'm a native bee. Honeybees are bad. They're, they're European. They're non-native. But I want to tell you right now, bees, even honeybees, they're near and dear to my heart. I mean, that's where I did most of my research is with honeybees. I do like the native bees a lot. I support all bees. All bees matter kind of thing. I really do think that they each serve a purpose. I am following this very closely. I'm reading a lot of the literature and a lot of the research. But right now I've been pretty far removed from the bee research area for about 3 years now. So I can't really offer too much of an expert comment beyond what I just mentioned. Sorry about that.
No worries. We only have time for a couple more, but I see a couple common trends here, like both maybe in Massachusetts, Southeast Massachusetts, or in sort of New England in general. What are some common insects that we could see out in the woods right now over winter?
Ooh, that's when I'll tell you what, when Brian came to me with this presentation, and I was like, a winter presentation about insects. Are you serious? This is really what you want? But I'm still really thrilled to be doing this, because insects are they're a lot harder to find this time of year than they would be in the summer. But there are a bunch, and you can find a lot of overwintering stages. Once again, your morning cloak would be a really, really cool find. That's a really cool butterfly to find. That it's actually, truth be told, that's my favorite butterfly in all of Massachusetts, maybe in all of the United States. I really, really like that butterfly. Just really cool colors. Woolly big caterpillars, you're going to be able to find. You might be able to find moths. You actually can find this really weird mosquito. It's a Culex mosquito, and this is a mosquito that we believe is kind of most responsible for transmitting West Nile virus. So you can actually find that mosquito, and hopefully people aren't having these personal, meaningful experiences with Culex mosquito, but you might be able to find that one. You can find that mosquito. A lot of people are finding spiders. Spiders are still around. And so you can find a lot of cool things that way.
Like this is Doug.
You end up finding some fun stuff. And it doesn't necessarily have to be finding an insect. It can be a way in which an insect impacted your life. So maybe just this week you realized that you had this favorite, object in your house, and that object would not have been possible without the insects. That still counts, in my opinion.
And Blake, I would recommend looking in water, moving streams and ponds. You get
That's a good recommendation. That's definitely a good recommendation, is because you're right, you can find a lot of the immatures of dragonflies in ponds. And I have a fancy aquatic net, but what you can actually do is take a strainer, like the same kind of water strainer that you would use to basically cook pasta in and drain the water out. You can take that and you can dip it into a pond and lift that up, and you'll be able to find tons of really cool stuff. Dragonfly nymphs, damselfly nymphs, water bugs, because those things exist year round. You can find them any time of the year.
Yeah, I think, is it stoneflies that can live in really, really cold temperatures?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our aquatic insects can live in really cold temperatures. I'm not particularly sure what the minimum temperature is, what the threshold is for these. If you say stoneflies, then I guess I learned something tonight.
Awesome, Blake. Let's see. Can you find bark beetles and longhorn beetles on? You can find bark beetles and longhorn beetles on rotting trees this time of year. That's a great point. I think there's a knowledgeable person behind that little comment there. Let's see. I'm just going to go through really quick. Doug, if you have a chance, I don't know if. Are bed bugs much of a problem in this area, Blake?
It depends on, in my opinion, even just a couple cases of bed bugs is a problem. And we do see that from time to time. We do think that there's become a resurgence in the number of bed bug cases. Particularly has to do with maybe what we think is pesticide resistance that the bed bugs are spreading. There's a lot of reasons behind it. And you typically find them in people that have been doing a lot of traveling too. Traveling's become really, really popular. I'd say in the past like 10 to 20 years, especially with the advent of social media, and people really want to be posting, oh, I was in Italy this past, I was here, I was there, I was like, traveling all over the world. And so bed bugs are not really a sign of being dirty. They're just a sign of being in places where bed bugs are. And that's really all there is to it, being where humans are and being where bed bugs are. And we are seeing more cases now than we have like basically since the 80s. But they're not something that is like a huge, they're not like, I mean, I might get maybe 1 or 2 people talking to me about bed bugs every year. It's not that much. But like I said, even maybe 1 or 2 is what you would consider to be too much.
Awesome. Thanks, Blake. So we're going to save the comments, and there's a lot of great comments in here. If you haven't checked out, some people have put some pretty interesting comments as well. If I missed a couple questions, I'm sorry. If anything that is pertinent, feel free to contact us, and we'll be able to answer or to guide you in the right direction. Really quick, Blake, I just have one quick question just for anyone out there who is interested, or maybe there's kids at home who are interested in figuring and learning more about insects. What do you think would be the best way for them, or the best resource or place that they can go to learn about bugs during this time?
I think that some of the best thing that the kids can do this time of year, there's 2 kind of recommendations. So the old school recommendation for people old like me would be to get a good set of field guides. And there's a few of them that I definitely recommend. There's one called Tracks and Sign of Insects, and that one is really, really good because it has a lot of stuff that you don't necessarily even need to see the insect to know that the insect was there. And so I really like that one. But there, in general, there's a few other field guides that are just on general insects that would be more useful as we move into the summer. The next thing that I would recommend doing for kids these days and for the younger folk is to download a set of apps on your phone. And these apps, like, I'm gonna be perfectly honest, if you're a skeptic like me, you're gonna spend a lot of time really trying to trip up these apps and kind of fool them to really limit test, to really figure out like how they work. And you can really fool the apps and the identification really actually pretty easy. You just have to show it something that it's never seen before, and that you can find a lot of insects that people haven't seen, or just a weird angle of an insect. But for some of the really common ones, I would recommend the best apps that, at least that I've seen, that I've tested, is Seek by iNaturalist. That one's really good, where kids can go outside and basically play Pokemon Go. So I recommend delete that Pokemon Go off your phone and download Seek instead. And they're basically the same thing. And Seek is way cooler. And then you have iNaturalist. The iNaturalist app might be more geared at older people, maybe more science-minded, where they're really interested in documenting the insects around them. And then, again, the identification features, they're really kind of, they're good, they're not perfect, and they're becoming better and better all the time. And so I would definitely recommend those for starters. And because there can be a hump with insect identification, at least in the beginning, and people might be turned off to that. And then the apps, I think, really make it easy for people to just jump right in and start identifying the insects. We had one question from Ann Jones about what the book was. I can send Brian a list of books and my recommendations on field guides, and then we can disperse that to the panelists. And they can pick and choose. I can talk about some of the pros and cons about some of the books that I've had personal experience with that I really enjoy.
Awesome, thanks, Blake. Blake, is there anything else that you want to add for this? Otherwise, we'll start to wrap it up by talking about the guided adventures and then next week. So, is there anything that you want to leave us with, Blake, before we start to turn the page?
Yeah, just one last bit. If you liked this presentation, any feedback would be great. I give a number of these presentations. You can always talk to me, and we can work out putting another presentation like this together. I have a bunch of them. One on insect declines, one on invasive insects, one on pollinators, one on native bees. All these things that we couldn't really get to in just this 1 hour block. So if you're interested in some of these little tangents and some of these you want to know a little bit more about insects, you can always feel free to reach out to me, and and we can kind of coordinate that kind of presentation. And it doesn't need to be for a big group. It can just be for 2 or 3 people, or it can be for less than 5 people. I'm really happy to entertain that. You can get my contact information either probably through Brian. Brian might be the best place, or you can, if you notice it at the end of my presentation, maybe you can send that. I'll put it in the chat as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the participants will be getting a follow-up email after this, and with a couple of things that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. And so I would definitely be a great person if you're looking to get in contact with Blake. You can find that through me. So with that, thanks so much, Blake. It's always, this is, I can't remember how many programs I've done with you, and it's always, I learn something new, and it's always a real a pleasure listening to you and learning from you. And I'm sure the participants have the same, feel the same way. So thank you very much, Blake. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Doug. This has been great, really great experience, and I really appreciate all the effort.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Blake. So there is part of this program. Obviously, you heard the challenge. I will be sending you an email that will have more information about this particular challenge and how to complete it. And so if you're looking to take your knowledge a little bit step further and take it outside as for an adventure, there will be 2 guided nature walks that are being offered. One is through the NSRWA and one is through the South Shore Natural Science Center. And you can see the dates right there. One, the NSRWA will be on Sunday, and then at the Science Center, that will be on Tuesday, the 19th. Both of them will start at 10 a.m. run to about 11:30-ish. These spaces are incredibly limited. We are keeping these group sizes way low for safety reasons. And so these are paid events. And in the email that I'm going to send out in just a few minutes once we close here, we'll have registration links if you would like more information, or if you'd like to register, the links for these 2 separate events will be right there. And like I said, it is first come, first serve. However, these events are being offered only to you. These are not public events. These are only to people who have registered and participated in this first week of the Winter Nature Challenge. So you'll all be getting more information on that in just a few minutes after we're done here. Okay, so so pretty exciting to continue that, and we definitely want to continue to be a resource for you going forward. If you can't join us on one of these walks, we definitely want to be there to help answer any questions that you might have regarding any of these subjects that you're going to be learning about. So so once again, thank you all very much for participating. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass it on over to Chris, who is going to be talking about next week's Winter Nature Challenge session.
All right. So next week's challenge is titled Wonder, A Child's View of Nature. And our presenters are Teresa Delahunt, who's a Science Center educator, and then also Diane Thurison, who's our former Nature Center preschool director. They have a vast amount of knowledge. They're so passionate about working with children and bringing children out into nature. And they'll be leading you and guiding you through various ideas of what you can do to just let kids wonder and experience nature, and how you can also wonder through a child's view. And so that's going to be a lot of really great information that they're going to share, and a lot of resources that they're going to share. So we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday, and thank you again. And we hope some of you can join us on those walks. So I think, is there anything else, Brian and Doug, before we sign off?
That's
No. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, Blake.
Great.
Yeah, thanks, Blake.
So, yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Have a
It was
good night.
really interesting. So thank you again, and we're signing off.
Thanks, everyone.